Hey listeners, welcome back to yet another blazing fast episode of What the Perf podcast. This is your host Mrinal and your co-host Nitesh.
Hey listeners, welcome back to the What the Perf podcast.
Nitesh, what's the topic for today?
Today we are going to discuss some best practices that we can follow in performance testing.
Great. Let's see what's in the news this week.
We have three news items this week. In the first item, Cloudflare is delivering HTTP2 upload speed improvements. So, since the lockdown has happened and work from home requirements have increased, upload speed requirements have also increased as people are now working from home. So in tests, what Cloudflare had noticed that upload speeds over HTTP2 were almost half than the HTTP 1.1. And this was because receive buffer size in HTTP2 is too tight. Its optimal value is around 512 KB that was found in another set of tests. They also auto-tuned the receive buffer size and it gave best results in upload speed with 512 KB. So HTTP2 upload buffer auto-tuning is now fully deployed in the Cloudflare Edge.
So this is available to all Cloudflare customers going forward, right?
Yes.
We
They
should
have
do.
also released a patch for normal customers as well.
Okay. So we should do a episode on performance improvements in HTTP2 versus HTTP 1.1, Nitish. It's a really good topic. We should do it sometime.
Definitely.
Yeah. So I have the second piece of news today. It is about Microsoft Azure. So they're bringing AI supercomputing to all their customers. Generally, AI and ML workloads require heavy compute power and bandwidth. For example, you must have heard about OpenAI's GPT-3 natural language processing library. It used some 175 billion parameters for training the model. So because of this high scale of compute power required in these workloads, the infra used is called as AI supercomputing. Microsoft Azure has now made available this AI supercomputing on its cloud platform for its customers. In a blog post, they announced that the new NDA100 V4 VM series, their most powerful and massively scalable AI VM, available on demand from 8 to 1000 of thousands of interconnected NVIDIA GPUs across hundreds of VMs. So the blog says most customers will see an immediate boost of 2x to 3x compute performance over the previous generation of similar systems. If you are interested to learn more about this, you can visit our this episode's description, where you will find the link to this blog.
So the customers can now develop their products which can utilize this feature.
Yes, exactly. I think this particular capability was not available in other cloud providers. Maybe Azure is the first one to bring this. We'll have to read about it a little bit.
Right. So in the third news, there are a lot of conferences happening this week and next month also. So there are two interesting conferences that we could find. One is popular chaos testing tool vendor Gremlin is hosting chaos conference in October. And before that, CloudBees, which is a CI/CD solutions provider, is hosting DevOps World virtual conference in September. So in
Mhm.
the CloudBees conference, there will be keynote address on DevOps and the future of software delivery. Whereas in the Chaos conference, there will be talks from industry thought leaders. There will be also hands-on workshop and chaos engineering and site reliability. You can attend these to gain understanding on where the software industry is headed as a whole. The registration links you can find in the description of this podcast.
Yeah, I've heard about Gremlin. It's a chaos testing tool. I think it's built on top of Netflix Chaos Monkey.
Hmm.
We should try it out sometime, Nitish.
Okay, so that concludes our news section.
Yeah, thank you for the news items, Nitish. Nitesh, let's get started with today's topic. So first, let's think about what are best practices in general.
Sure, Mrinal. So, best practices are steps that we can follow in any task to ensure accurate, efficient, and repeatable results.
Yeah, so with that context set, let's look at some areas in performance where we can follow some best practices. The first one that I can think of is monitoring the health of your load generators and the test tool itself. This is especially if you're running your tests using JMeter, right?
Right,
I think Load Runner provides these kind of monitoring out of the box.
right,
But if you're using any open source, you have to set up these kind of monitoring on your own.
right. We can definitely use some tools like VMstat also, right?
Yeah, and we can have nice looking dashboards, build nice looking dashboards using Grafana.
Correct.
There are multiple plugins which you can use and monitor the health of the test tool itself, the machine health where the test tool is running.
Yeah, it comes of a great help that when you are monitoring the test and finding some issue there, so you should first check whether your test tool itself is not giving the problem.
Exactly.
So to add to that, second best practice could be that monitor all possible infra components of your application. It really helps in drilling down the bottleneck or the root cause when you encounter issues.
Okay, moving on to the third one. Write down notes when your test is running about what you see happening during the test. So this will help you when you actually start analyzing your test results after the test. Most of the times it so happens that you had thought of something when the test is running, and because you have to send out a report soon after the test is executed, or you have to start analyzing the results, you tend to forget that you had observed something during the test, and you forget to put it in your observations. So it's a good practice that you write down your notes, make a notes of your observations while the test is running.
Right, Manal, it comes of a great help while analyzing the test result and the different charts or different graphs you see.
Yeah, exactly.
So next we should talk on storing your raw results somewhere safe. Like in Roadrunner, we generally see the raw results as .lrr files. So if you are working on the results file, you should always keep the original file as safe because it could corrupt your current file. So
Yeah,
that should
exactly.
not happen. Otherwise, you will lose and you will not know when you will need them.
And you never have time to run the same test again, right, Nitesh?
Right, definitely. And also your factors change if you try to run the same test again.
Exactly, you won't get the same result file back.
Right.
Okay, the fifth one, the fifth best practice is decide your test duration based on caching in your application. It is usual that your application will have some sort of caching layer, so and it will have its own duration of caching. So if your testing duration is within that caching duration, you will end up hitting cached data, and you will get the response from the caching layer. So to avoid this, you should be aware of what are all the caching layers in your application, and you should have a test duration which is greater than that of the caching duration.
Right.
So this gives you a realistic scenario of testing.
Right. So moving on, I'll like to add to that in the script section that you should definitely randomize your test data. You should not reuse your test data in subsequent iterations of your test scripts.
Exactly.
It definitely comes handy when you are checking the caching mechanism also. As Mrinal earlier said, you should be aware of any caching layers in the architecture. So if you are sending the same data, it will definitely hit that caching mechanism and you will not get the real-time results because users are not doing the same transaction or the same data again and again. All the users are having different data, unique data. So you should always think about that and you should practice that in your script.
Yeah, one good example would be if you're testing an e-commerce application, adding the same product to the cart may not give you a realistic response time, right?
Exactly.
It may get cached somewhere. Your cart object may get cached somewhere, and you're getting the same data back from the caching layer. So it's best to have a random set of test data, so that you don't end up reusing the same data.
Right.
So the next best practice is, follow good naming conventions in your test scripts. This is to ensure you have readable test scripts, and it will also facilitate good automation. So I have seen in my previous engagements that, if there is a team of, let's say, 5 people, and each one of them follows their own naming conventions, it becomes really hard to automate the entire test execution process. This is especially when, I mean, I'm talking about automating because most of the companies now use open source tools. You have to build around the tools for automation, and in these cases, if you are not following good naming conventions, you are bound to end up, it is very difficult to automate stuff.
Right.
So
Automation requires some convention, definitely.
yes, yes, exactly. So maybe create a best practices document within your team, or naming convention rules within your team, and have your team follow it.
Right.
This will greatly help you to automate, and it will generally reduce your, it will free up your mind to think about other important things, basically, right,
Right.
Nitesh?
So to quote an example, we used a small bash script to generate file names of the scripts and result files. Also, we used the same script to add the parameters name also. So it helped a lot while automating that
Yeah,
stuff.
that is even better. Creating names from scripts, it'll actually, it'll remove out all the errors that you might end up making if you were manually adding those names, right? That is
Exactly.
even better.
Yeah. So we would use sometimes we would use date parameter. Sometimes we would just normal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 parameters.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great one.
So the next best practice that everyone should follow is you should write good comments before you custom code in your scripts. It facilitates easy readability, and the other person or the some other user who is using your scripts get the idea what you have written or what you have changed in the script.
Yeah, exactly. Otherwise, you'll have a hard time figuring out what that variable is doing. And
Right.
again, the concept of, the best practice of having good naming conventions applies here as well, because you have to choose good, understandable names for your variables within your
Right.
code, right?
Right.
Okay. So moving on, this one is a dead giveaway. I mean, it's very obvious. You have to correlate all your dynamic values.
Right.
Many times I have seen that if a particular dynamic value is hard to find, people just leave it out hard coded, and that results in, creating a lot of errors while the test is running, and that may lead you to a wrong direction, because you will think the error happened because of some problem in the application, but actually it's your script that is creating the error. So
Exactly.
always, always, always create good, or correlate all possible dynamic values. um, Talk to your developers, understand which, if you can't make out from your recordings, record a second time, or reach out to your developers via which values can change over time, and then try to correlate them.
Right. So a good performance tester and an engineer exactly knows that where could the dynamic value appear.
Exactly.
But so in the scripts, sometimes you even if you run it twice or thrice, it gives the same value. So you might think it's a normal parameterization, whereas it could be a correlation issue. So you should the if with the experience you get the idea that which value could be a parameter and which value could be a correlation.
Exactly. One or two easy ways to find out which value could be a dynamic value is, one is, just record it twice. it will definitely, I mean, if it's a dynamic value, it will definitely change in the second recording. The second point is, as you mentioned, Nitesh, run the script after you record your script. You've done all the changes, you think you have correlated everything. Run the same script for 2 or 3 iterations. If some value is dynamic, it will definitely fail, and you will get to know then and there.
Right.
So yeah.
So the earlier we talked about a point while randomizing test data. This comes in handy here. So if you
Exactly.
use one test data, it will give you different dynamic value than the other test data.
Yes,
So
yes,
it gets
exactly.
easy to spot which one is it.
Yeah.
So next best approach is use think times in your script, because real time user doesn't just keeps on clicking. A real time user goes to a page, thinks about it, reads it, or whatever transaction they want to do, they do it, and then move on to the next page or move on to the next link. So you should
Exactly.
implement that in your scripts. If you are not doing that, you would be reaching your maximum throughput with very less number of users, which won't give you the real data. Like if let's say 100 users could use your application, whereas in the test you would do that, you would achieve that throughput with 5 or 6 users. So that's not a correct number. If you report that, the developer or the management would think that our application is so bad that it can't even get 5 6 users online at the same time, whereas the truth is far from that.
Yes. So unless you're trying to simulate a DDoS attack, you should use think times, right, Nitesh?
Right.
Yeah. Okay. The 11th best practice is modularize your scripts. So this will help you maintain your scripts very well. Almost every tool, every performance test tool offers this capability. So I can recall it's called actions in LoadRunner, and in JMeter it's called test fragments. And Soasta, as far as I can remember, it's called nested clips and child clips. So what this helps you in is, I mean, whenever there is a update in your application, not every part of your script will change. So the changes will be localized to certain API calls or certain portions of your script. So if you can modularize your scripts, you can change only the part that has some change in the application, right?
Right.
So when you modularize, you can avoid touching your script entirely, and that in turn will help you maintain your script. So you can be sure that if at all the script fails at some point, it is at the point where you change something, not the rest of the script. So it is a really good practice to keep your scripts modularized.
Yeah, this basically is analogous to functions in the code. You can't
Exactly.
write same thing again and again, right? You always write that in a function and call that function whenever you want to execute something related to that. So same thing
Yeah.
is implemented here using the terms modularization.
Yes.
So the next best practice is you should always automate your test runs using Jenkins or some automation tools. It will save you a lot of time that you have spent doing all pre-test steps like logging into a VM, starting the test tool, etc.
Yeah, especially when you don't have a UI to run your tests. I mean, there is a lot of, especially now, people are heavily relying on open source tools. They don't
Right.
have all the parts uh, built into it. You have to build around the test tool. So Jenkins is a good automation platform to use with such open source tools to
Right.
run your tests. So the next one I would like to talk about is, while you're running your test, don't allow any changes on the application or on the infrastructure side unless you are testing specifically for that change. What I mean by that is, so let's say you have planned a test. Your test is the goal of your test is to observe the application under test under a steady load. So in this case, you don't want to introduce changes into the application or infrastructure. The other case would be, you want to test how your application behaves when there is load on it and there is a deployment or a service a code on one particular service gets updated. So unless you are testing for the second case, don't introduce any changes. Inform everyone in the team, send an email out to your infrastructure teams, your application teams. If you are sharing your environment with them, just tell them we are running a load test. Don't introduce changes into the environment.
So the next best practice we should follow is, if time permits, run the same test a second time to ensure repeatability and consistency. Your test results should be consistent when you keep all the variables same. If they are not same, then some other event would have affected your test results.
Yes, this is quite similar to the previous one. So, I mean, you should be able to prove to whoever is expecting results from you that your test is repeatable. You are giving them results that are consistent, right?
Right.
Yeah. So, the last best practice that we want to discuss or we want to talk about today is, don't focus only on one measurement. For example, don't focus just on average response time. You have to look holistically at all other metrics. In fact, it is better to know what metrics you want to measure before your test starts. That
Right.
way, after your test is over, you can take a look on all of these, then overlay few metrics one upon the other, compare metrics, check if one metric is going down while another one is increasing. You can do all sorts of combinations and then try to analyze. Don't
Right.
the point.
Although they
Mhm.
are related, but you still should keep track of all of them.
Yes, exactly. Don't focus just on any one measurement. But like somebody might tell you, I just want the response time, and I just care about the response time. They might be expecting that, but in order for you to add value to your test, just keep an eye on all of the uh, metrics. So that brings us to the last section of the episode, which is what the crash.
In this week's What the Crash, I have 4 items. So, Uganda's Ministry of Health website crashed after citizens tried to download the new COVID-19 guidelines.
From what I can see, it was just PDF files having the guidelines.
Right.
What they could have done to avoid the website going down is put all those files. They're all just static files, right? You don't need to process
Yeah, yeah.
some request or anything. You could have just kept those on. They could have just kept the files on either a CDN or posted them on S3 and provided a link on the website. I
Yeah,
think,
exactly.
yeah,
This could have been easily avoided.
avoided.
So, second news is regarding New Zealand Stock Exchange website that crashed for a third day in a row. It
Wow.
happened because of a DDoS attack. Generally, DDoS attacks are avoided by following that from which IP the traffic is coming, and if the request and the size of the request is same for few number of requests, then IPs of that set of IP could be blocked by the website. So the third item is from a US school set of schools. Miami-Dade Charter Schools website crashed on the first day when 275,000 students and nearly 20,000 teachers tried to start the day in virtual classrooms amid the coronavirus pandemic.
Wow. Just, I mean, the crash news due to COVID keep coming. I
Right.
don't know when it's going to end.
So till now there has been no solution that could be found. So the last news item is regarding a recent outage that was witnessed in Cloudflare and some other website. So CenturyLink, that is an internet service provider, was down last week, and Cloudflare is availing its services, basically the internet services, and resulting in outage in Cloudflares also. Since Cloudflare is being used by many websites, they also were crashed.
Yeah, one fun fact about this, Nitish. Last week, there was an online chess Olympiad happening between India and Russia.
Right.
when this Cloudflare issue happened, both India and Russia were declared as winners. I don't know if that's a good thing.
Oh, because
Okay.
they couldn't find the result online.
Yeah.
So that concludes our what the crash news section this week.
Okay. Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. You can share your feedback with us on Twitter at whattheperf. You can also email us at whattheperf@gmail.com. You can send in your suggestions for future episodes also on this email ID. If you find this podcast interesting, share it with your friends and colleagues, because whenever someone shares this podcast, somewhere far away, a perf engineer gets a monitoring tool in performance environment. So see you in the next one. Bye.